Hi everybody. Hopefully you're having a good Monday so far. Today I'll be reading chapter 9 of my novel Living Nightmare. By now you should know it's the first of the series, The Other Side of Gifted. Last Monday I read chapter 8, in which Tobin was forced into a lunch date with Ange and her uncle Barton, a rather unsuccessful one at that, where Ange's uncle seemed more interested in Tobin's supposed power of foresight than in bonding with his niece. Chapter 9, we see the aftermath of that lunch date, and also Tobin gets a surprise visit from her parents. Chapter 9. It was a home invasion. A man at the door claimed he was from the gas company. An elderly woman let him in. They didn't see me. Didn't hear me yelling for her to close the door, lock it, and call the cops. Yelling at the man to stop, to leave her alone. She was a helpless old lady. She didn't listen. He ignored. Dream Journal. Dr. Dawson wasn't pleased with Tobin's behavior at the restaurant. Apparently, Mr. Barton thought it was his responsibility to give a report on her when he brought them back to Manuel. How nice. He had been upset, worried that Tobin's words would have a negative effect on Ange, and wanted to make sure the doctor was aware of what had happened. He hinted that Tobin's behavior might have stemmed from jealousy. If that was the case, he wasn't sure Ange should continue to socialize with her. What a jerk. Tobin glowered, staring at the forest through her bedroom window. Even now, a month later, it still bugged her. Jealous? Of what? Of having him for an uncle? Please. Her rebuttal, that Mr. Barton had introduced the subject that had started the disagreement, was brushed aside. Dr. Dawson said the man had been trying to find a way to connect with his niece. Ange's mental health would take some getting used to, and Mr. Barton was doing his best to create a rapport with her. Right. Ange wasn't even mad at her. She had forgiven Tobin before they even returned to Manuel. So why was it an issue? Tobin didn't give a shit what the others thought. She heard movement behind her, but didn't turn around. Breakfast was over, and with nothing to entertain her in the common room, she went to her own room to be alone. Ange was out with her uncle on a trip to a museum. Dr. Dawson had made no attempt at including her this time, thankfully. Her appointment with him was coming up soon, and she had hoped for some more time to herself. As if such a thing was allowed at Manuel. The person behind her cleared their throat. Female. A nurse. Tobin sighed and glanced over her shoulder. Tiffany. What did she want now? Another Snapchat photo op? The nurse smiled at her. Your parents are here. Isn't that wonderful? Tobin arched a brow. Was it? What are they doing at Manuel? She wondered. It wasn't the 12th of the month. When she failed to respond, Tiffany lost her smile but continued with her enthusiasm. They're with Dr. Dawson in his office. Dr. Dawson opened the door on her second knock, waved her in, and closed it behind her. Tobin stared at a vacant white folding chair that had been placed between the two leather chairs her parents sat in. They hadn't bothered to look at her when she entered, nor did they greet her. Not that she expected them to. Instead, she just stared at the chair. Dr. Dawson wanted her to sit between them. She blinked. The doctor returned to his desk. Catching her eye, he said, Tobin, please sit. She didn't want to. The presence of her parents unsettled her. They weren't supposed to visit today. She eyed them as she crossed her mother to sit in the empty chair. Barbara Tobin Blake preferred everything to be simple. The less maintenance, the better. She kept her auburn hair in a bob to her chin. Other than a few new silver threads breaking through the deep color, her mother's hair hadn't changed since Tobin was little. She wore no makeup, so the fine lines of age around her eyes and mouth were visible. Yet it didn't prevent her from being a quiet beauty with emerald-colored eyes. Not that she was aware of her appearance. Tobin wasn't sure her father was either. They had chosen each other based on mutual interests, not so much on abiding attraction. Dressed casually, her mother sat with a frown. A purse rested on her lap, her long fingers linked over it. Tobin noticed her knuckles were white. Stress. Her mother didn't like being away from her work. Tobin sat with her butt resting on the edge of the seat. No one spoke. She peeked to her right where her father was. James Blake's face was ageless. Unlike his wife, no wrinkles marred his features. His hair was black like hers, but kept short, with white streaks at his temples. The thick brown frames of his glasses had stayed the same despite the change in prescription. He was a man of habit and routine. Structure was important to him. He owned 8 outfits, one for each day of the week, and a black suit for funerals and formal events you couldn't get out of. He had on Monday's brown suit with beige suede elbow pads. The tense atmosphere and uncomfortable silence quickly got to be too much for Tobin. She drew her gaze from her father to look at Dr. Dawson. He was staring back and forth between her parents. She realized he was waiting for them to speak to her. She rolled her eyes. Her father spoke first, voice raspier than one would expect from a wire-thin man. "How is she doing?" "Why not ask Tobin?" Dr. Dawson made a point of nodding in her direction. She wanted to tell him it was a wasted effort, but that would mean talking. She shoved her hands underneath her thighs and stared at her lap. "I don't pay her. Besides, doctor, Tobin's here because she doesn't know how she is," her mother added. Damn, when did Tobin spill something on her pants? There was a brown stain on her left knee. Coffee? She scratched at it. "She's here for the nightmares. As for her well-being, she would know best," the doctor said. Tobin glanced at him, hearing the frustration in his voice. He rubbed his temples, glasses sliding down his nose. Their eyes met. He looked tired. Or was that just his annoyance toward her parents? He nodded at her. "Tobin, would you care to answer your father's question?" Not really, she thought, but said instead, "I still have nightmares, but I think the medication's helping." "And their pain," Dr. Dawson encouraged. "The victims. Do you feel it still?" Unable to answer, Tobin nodded and returned her attention to the stain on her pants. "So, she's not better. Leave it to her father to get to the point. Have you determined what's causing these dreams? Isn't that what you promised to do?" "Nightmares," Tobin murmured, then flinched. Did she say that out loud? "Tobin prefers them to be referred to as nightmares," Dr. Dawson said. "Fine. You told us you learned what triggered these," he paused, "nightmares." Tobin peeked over at him to find his eyes on her. She went back to studying the stain. Her mother chimed in. "We know already, don't we?" No one answered. "She gets those nightmares because she's too smart." There was a good dollop of pride in her voice. Tobin was a genius, and it made her crazy. "Well done." Tobin rolled her eyes. "You came up with that assumption," Dr. Dawson cut in. "We've been through this." "But you can't be positive it's not a factor. Look at that Nash man. He was brilliant. He had schizophrenia." Dr. Dawson let out a weighted sigh. Tobin didn't blame him. It doesn't mean his mental illness was born out of his intelligence. In any case, your daughter is not John Nash, nor is she schizophrenic. "You can't help her then," her father said. Tobin gave up on the stain. Dr. Dawson's face had taken on a red hue. "I didn't say that. All I am saying is that while she is a smart girl, that's not what's causing the nightmares." He shook his head. Her mother answered, "We understand." They didn't, clearly. but they wanted the subject to drop. Good. Now, I'd like to continue what we were discussing earlier. There was a shift, an audible gulp of dread. Or was that Tobin? My wife and I are very busy people, her father said. I know, but it would help her if you joined some of her therapy sessions once she leaves the institute. If she leaves. When, the doctor enunciated, she leaves here, you'll need to know how to help her. You'll get a better understanding of what she goes through as well. Her father made a noise. His face was dark. Tobin shifted in her chair, the seat creaking when she moved. We know what she goes through, her father said. For years we've endured her dreams. Excuse me, nightmares. Tobin winced. She couldn't look at him, so she turned to her mother, who blinked, but otherwise showed no reaction. Night after night we woke to screaming. We spent untold sleepless nights trying to keep calm. We had to change her clothes when she soiled them, not to mention the bedding. Trust me, doctor, we are certainly aware of her condition. His terse words made Tobin's stomach sour. She snapped the elastic on her wrist. I know, said Dr. Dawson, and I'm not disregarding any of that. But she was a child then, and the nightmares weren't as vivid. Her connection to the victims is stronger now. She dies with them. He waited to see if they were listening. She needs more now. Did she? She looked at her mother, who seemed oblivious to her father, who scowled at the doctor. What could they do to help her? Yes, sure, they came running whenever she screamed herself awake, but they didn't stay. They expected her to be logical. Dreams couldn't hurt her. Monsters weren't real. Go back to bed. What did Dawson think they could do for her now? Tobin's never needed us, her mother said. Even as a toddler, she was independent, spending her time alone with her studies. Perhaps that's the problem. I beg your pardon. You decided she was self-sufficient. So she was. I have a theory, he said, but he didn't get a chance to explain it before Tobin's father exploded. You blame us? Her dreams are our fault because we raised her to be self-reliant? That's not what I said, Dr. Dawson rubbed his face in exasperation. But it's possible that she had too many responsibilities growing up. Her imagination didn't get a chance to grow. As a result, it became stunted. So, she has bad dreams because we didn't lie to her. The vein pulsed in her father's forehead. Mr. Blake, I'm trying to make you understand how important your attendance is to her recovery. She needs your help in learning how to let go, to share her burdens. She needs to know that it's okay to ask for help. Her mother rejoined the conversation. Of course, we want to help her. She's our daughter. We'll try and make it when we can. I'd like you to come in at least twice a month. Twice a month? Her father countered. Impossible. We'll come when work permits it. The meeting ended soon after. Dr. Dawson tried discussing other topics, but no one left happy. That night had Tobin wishing for the nothing. A rare night during which the nightmares didn't leave her a frozen mess. The nothing was always a nice reprieve, though she couldn't exactly say what it was beside blackness. In this blackness she heard nothing, saw nothing, yet she remained aware. At times she wasn't sure which was worse, the nothing or the eyes that haunted her. That night she knew. The nothing was a gift. Like a horror film, the scenes unfolded. A flash of a boy, maybe 9, with dark brown skin and eyes. He wore a red t-shirt and black jogging pants with elastic bands at the bottoms. A flicker of a green school bag on his back, bearing the image of a Hulk. A Spider-Man lunchbox gripped in his hands. A loose shoelace threatened to trip him as it moved back and forth with each step. A low humming vibrated his chest and rattled through Tobin's. A car swerved from side to side on the road. The little boy stepped off the curb to cross the street, forgetting his mother's instruction to look both ways. The high whine of tires blasted Tobin's eardrums, the sensation of shock leaping forward like a hungry flame. The boy, stunned, froze as the black car increased its speed. The gush of urine ran down his legs, Tobin's legs. Then, the impact, bones crushing, heart erupting, pain ending. She woke with a cry, then a gasp. Excruciating pain palpitated through her. Her body felt like a bag of skin holding nothing but bone shards. She hurt. Everything hurt so badly. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her brain was filled with cotton. Wetness seeped beneath her, the smell of sweat and urine. Her heart raced, thudding loudly in her ears. Fire ate away at her insides, charring bone into ash, until unconsciousness was kind enough to take her under. Her body healed, threading itself together, but death stood near. It watched over her prone body, smiling. Well, that was the end of chapter 9. Pretty dramatic ending. Next Monday, I will read chapter 10, and we'll see what happened when she woke up after that particular nightmare. Until then, I hope that you have a fabulous week, and take care. Bye.